Bonjour, friends! It's World's Fair Girl 99 here. Did you know that over $110 million worth of art was lost in the 9/11 attacks? Not a single one of them, of course, compares to the loss of a single victim of that disaster, but I think that they deserve to be remembered too. I think that everything that was lost on that day deserves to be remembered, and that's what this series is going to be about. Our first piece of art that we are going to be discussing is the Bent Propeller. Bent Propeller was a 25-foot tall sculpture made of 3 red pieces of stainless steel by Alexander Calder. Calder was a decently famous sculptor. When I was doing research for this video, I took a look at some of his other works. He was quite the prolific sculptor. I highly recommend you look some of his stuff up. He even made a bunch of other things that resembled Bent Propeller pretty well. Now, returning to Bent Propeller itself, Calder called the sculpture the Stabile, hence why it was also known as the World Trade Center Stabile, but it was more commonly referred to as Bent Propeller, so we're going to be referring to it as such here. It was commissioned by the Port Authority in 1969 in an effort to humanize the complex. Basically, the original public reaction to the complex wasn't all that great. Amongst other things, people called them an eyesore, a waste of money, etc., etc. A lot of people just didn't like them. Plus, to build the complex, the Port Authority had to use eminent domain to destroy a popular shop street called Radio Row that specialized in selling electronics such as radio. This was not a very popular move in the city at all and was criticized by many people. When the piece arrived at the World Trade Center in 1971, it was initially put on display outside of one World Trade Center, aka the North Tower. Later, it was moved to a raised walkway that connected Building 7 to the rest of the Trade Center complex. It sat just outside of the building's entrance in a very visible spot. Anybody walking by the building could have seen it. It was quite beautiful, wasn't it? I know as a historian I'm supposed to be impartial with the things that I discuss, but this work of art, man, was absolutely beautiful. I'm unfortunate in the sense that I've never got to see it in its original form myself, as I wasn't even 3 years old at the time of the 9/11 attacks. Speaking of, at the time of the 9/11 attacks, Calder was long since dead, for almost a quarter of a century at that point. So he didn't live long enough to see the 9/11 attacks. But someone else did. His grandson, Alexander Rower, who was a New York resident at the time of the attacks, and watched them from his apartment. What happened to Bent Propeller on that tragic day? For about a month, nobody knew the answer to that question. If you could believe it, the priority wasn't to locate the sculpture so much as it was to locate the literal thousands of missing people. Even Rower put Bent Propeller on the back burner of his priorities, as he would bring supplies to Ground Zero workers daily using his pickup truck. Though of course, he wondered what happened to his grandfather's famous sculpture. After a while of searching through the remains of the World Trade Center, and the findings became increasingly more and more grim, Rower decided to finally start searching for Bent Propeller. He printed out a picture of the sculpture and put the following caption: "Please help recover and preserve famous American sculpture." Now, the answer to what happened to Bent Propeller came exactly 1 month after the September 11th attacks. Now, compared to some of the other works of art at the World Trade Center on 9/11, Bent Propeller got off somewhat lucky, I guess. I say that in the sense that most of the artworks at the complex at the time were completely destroyed and had no remains found. Bent Propeller, as it originally was destroyed, of course, but almost half of it was recovered. I want to say about 40% or something along those lines. Briefly, Rower wanted to incorporate the remains of Bent Propeller into a new work of art, though that idea was quickly abandoned. There was also brief talk about a possible restoration to the sculpture's body, but it was quickly decided that there wasn't enough of the sculpture left to even attempt a restoration. And so with those decisions, Bent Propeller had the plug on it. Now it truly was an icon of the past. Today, a remnant of Bent Propeller can be found at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum in New York City. I was lucky enough to be able to have gotten to visit the museum and see it for myself. Here's how I'll describe what it looks like to you. If you don't have any context about what it once was, you would never have been able to tell what it once was by looking at its remains. It just looks like typical debris from the World Trade Center remains. The distinctive red coloration that the sculpture is known for is pretty much gone. In its place is a rusted, burnt look that holds brief glimpses of what it once was along its scarred body. Here's a fun little fact for you. In the picture, do you see that phone right next to it? That came from the South Tower observation deck on top of the building. Yeah. As for the "That's all, folks" sign, that came from the mall underneath the World Trade Center's Warner Brothers store. If you've never gotten to see the museum for yourself, I highly, highly, highly recommend go checking it out. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to subscribe to World's Fair Girl 99 for more tales of art lost at the World Trade Center, and more. I've been Frost Nicoletti. Until next time, friends. See you later.